I want to welcome everybody to our celebration of the American Yiddish Theater and its music. And I want to say that this is a program that also celebrates the 25th anniversary of the Joseph and Rosalind Newman grant to the Yale University Library of an endowment of Yiddish literature, and it's known as the Joseph and Rosalind Newman Yiddish Literature Collection. It was a very generous gift, and it has enabled us over the years, this is the 25th anniversary, of collecting all kinds of wonderful items in Yiddish, starting with books and manuscripts, and also sheet music. And we have by now a very large and wonderful collection of Yiddish sheet music, which takes us back to the beginning of Yiddish-speaking immigration of Jews who spoke Yiddish as their native language, to the United States. We also have actually a lot of music from Europe and from Israel, then Palestine, that goes back to the beginning of the 20th century as well, and even earlier. But today we're going to celebrate particularly American Yiddish theater music, which was at the time that it existed at its heyday, at the beginning of the 20th century and probably into the 30s, so popular. And the immigrant community went to these theaters, most of them on 2nd Avenue, to sort of take in the Yiddish world that they had come from and to meet each other, and also to begin to Americanize, because it was really also their entry into American life and culture. And the Yiddish stars of the day, Tomaszewski, and I'm trying to think of some others, I'm sure many of you could Mark Slobin, who's about to speak, will tell you about it, were like gods, you know, they were it. And they sang and they danced and they acted, and they were wonderful. And so we're really thrilled to be able to have this event here today. And it came about through a collaboration of the program in Judaic Studies at the library and the music library, who made it all possible. Ruth Ann McTire, who is the Mellon music librarian at the music library, and Suzanne Lovejoy, who worked tirelessly to make this happen, who is the assistant librarian for public services at the music library, and a musician herself. And then, of course, all the wonderful singers who are going to participate later. But we also thought we should have a little background in history of the theater, and we invited two great scholars to come and speak as well. And I am now going to introduce to you Ruth Ann McTire, who is our music librarian, who will introduce our speakers.
Nanette had a great idea, and Suzanne and I have been thrilled to have the opportunity to work with her on this project. So I know you're going to have an enjoyable afternoon ahead of you. It's my pleasure to introduce our two speakers this afternoon, Mark Slobin, the Winslow-Kaplan Professor of Music at Wesleyan University, will speak on Yiddish sheet music in the Tenement Era, and Michael Ochs, who is the retired Richard French music librarian at Harvard University and a senior lecturer on music when he was there, who will speak about tailoring an operetta to its audience, Rumshinsky's Die goldene Kale of 1923. I could go on, but I know we want to get started with the lectures, so I'm going to turn the mic over to Mark to get started, and welcome, Mark. Thank you for being here.
Thanks. Well, this is fun. I always love any opportunity to get back to this sheet music that I fell in love with about, a long time ago, 40 years or more. So I'm going to start with a little social history to situate what it is we're talking about and listening to today, simply like how did this happen, that this was possible, what were the conditions in which this flourished, and then I'm going to kind of unpack what we are calling sheet music. I actually didn't bring one. I was going to. A sheet music folio, which consists of different components. So we'll go into cases to analyze the music, the packaging itself, okay, of the songs. So when we talk about Yiddish popular culture, Yiddish theater in this very general way, what does this mean? We're talking about people who spoke Yiddish as a native language, as a vernacular language in Eastern Europe, which they had been doing for about 1,000 years. And they did have popular culture. It's not like it was totally an artifact of modernity, but the kind of popular culture we're talking about is purely a modern phenomenon. That is to say, they read books, they circulated books, but they didn't have what we would think of as popular culture. And what do I mean by that? I mean media, I mean commodification, a system of circulation, a group of people who are professionals, the idea of technologies that emerge, new technologies which allow for mass distribution for large audiences gathered in urban spaces. That sort of thing is what we mean by popular culture. This was not possible until the Jews moved into that context, which they did in Europe, beginning in the 1850s, 60s, 70s, and particularly with the spread of the railroads, which allowed Jews to get on trains and move around and to take songs from place to place, and for theater troops to spring up that could move from place to place easily. Things like that just did not happen before. The official invention of the Yiddish theater is usually given as 1876 in a town called Iași in Romania, which has to do with the Russo-Turkish wars, and I can't have time to go into all those histories. But these guys created what became a professional theater exactly at the moment when emigration started to the United States. So it's not like there was an old tradition of Yiddish theater, of Yiddish entertainment, of Yiddish vaudeville before the emigration. Okay, so this is a simultaneous phenomenon. The audiences and the performers, just as they're getting this thing down, just as they're getting this together, they're all getting on the same ships and going to America. And 80% of them end up in New York City. You have this gigantic population that never existed anywhere in Jewish culture of people who are all striving and living in this, condensed, it was the densest part of the United States at that time, too, population-wise. This allowed for a market. Okay? And so it allowed for this kind of, as I say, this class of entertainers. Not only that, it allowed for consumer culture on a scale which you had not seen before. So as the sound recording has just been invented, and it takes a while to percolate through so that people have record players at home. That's, pianos are something that people needed to have in their homes. They decided they were sold on this as upward mobility in European culture and then particularly in America. And so you get a nexus of entertainment based on new technologies and a kind of bourgeois sensibility, even though these are very poor people who are, as we know, working in sweatshops and so forth. So you have the phenomenon of a store which sells pianos. It sells on which you can rest the sheet music that you buy, and which you will buy the recording. They will sell you the recording, and they'll sell you the record player, okay? And all of that is available on installments. For the first time in history, you could you could get these things on installments. And so they sold an ideology, so a certain kind of bourgeois ideology, which in a sense has nothing to do with Yiddishkeit. It's about upward mobility and in a situation that people are craving this. So that's the kind of background. Sheet music itself is a product of lithography. Lithography is a pretty late invention. The idea that you could put out 1 million copies, say, and sell 1 million copies of a piece of music doesn't happen until the late 19th century anywhere in the world. America is held together by popular culture. unlike Europe and traditionally. And so these products, these techniques, these technologies, as we know, being flooded by media today, are part of American life. So they're tapping into and making use of that system. The other side of popular culture, however, is a different meaning of the word. That is to say, it comes from the people. It's something that is popular that people recognize and identify with, okay? And so this is not a system of popular culture as we think of with distant celebrities, faraway music capitals. This is based on knowing everything about the people that produce this and living side by side with them. So that's another version of what we would call popular theater traditions, which go back thousands of years and are still in many parts of the world, but in the 19th century you had in Paris and such places, and in New York, where you have stars living in neighborhoods where people see them, they hear about they can literally hear them arguing, the wife and the husband, then they go on stage and they act out a husband and wife arguing, and everybody knows what this is about really, or they think they know what it's about. That feeling of being close to the people that are producing your culture is another side of popular culture, okay? So there's kind of two sides to this whole question of what we mean by this. The theater was one place, but there were also vaudeville shows and dives and bars and low-grade entertainment, which was much more knockabout, much more raunchier and maybe more, livelier. But we have very little record of that, almost no record of that. What we have is the record of what you would call the legitimate theater of the Yiddish stage. Because one of the things that happened was that they produced all this music. Not all of the music you're going to hear today, by the way, is from the Yiddish theater. Some of it is just pop songs. There were pop songs that were not on the Yiddish theater stage. So that's a kind of basic background. I think I've covered most of that. And then you get these stars like the Tomaszewski's husband and wife and so forth, Jacob Adler and a whole lot of other people. Okay, so what I'm going to do is talk about the actual artifact, the sheet music folio. A folio is usually 4 pages. The covers, you've all been exposed to the covers because they are on the poster, and I'm going to talk first about that. This is what we call iconography, okay, in academia. What are these pictures? How do they work? What is the information? So what I did, I got a collection of this stuff. I got a stack of it because I could still go to Hebrew Publishing Company, was still on Delancey Street, and they let me go upstairs and pull things out of off the shelves, which would have been in packets from the printer unopened since 1911. After that, they closed, and all of this has been sold off and archived various places, but I was able to get my own thing. So what I did is just simply stare at this stuff. When you open it, you see a very simple line of music. It's so that because any shop girl can play it who gets a few lessons. That's the idea. This is not virtuoso music, with rare exceptions. And you get the song text. So you have song texts which are in Yiddish, but sometimes they're bilingual. Sometimes they're in Yiddish and English too, which makes it really interesting because they tell different stories. Then you have the back cover, which, if I were doing an hour or two, we'd go into all that stuff. The back cover is usually the catalog of the publishers, which gives you the other listings, and that's enormously useful. They may list classical music that they sell too, or other songs that, and so forth. So it's a complex artifact. It's very, very dense and interesting. So what I'm going to do is a couple examples. I'm going to go quickly through some iconography issues. Then I'm going to play some music, and maybe we'll actually all sing something when I get to the end of that. I'll try not to go too long, but this stuff is so attractive. Okay, so this really fascinated me. This is the kind of thing that fascinated me. Maybe I will take the mic out so I can kind of look at this and talk about it at the same time a little more easily. Okay, so what do we got here? These are 2 sheet music covers. On the left, we have Lichtbändchen. On the right, Rachmana Donner. Okay, these, what is here? Let's look at the left side here. What strikes us, this is, of course, when I do this in class, we just kind of go around and try to, what are the components? But I'll just tell you what's there. What's there is a lot of Art Nouveau figuration. So it's up with the times. It's doing modern European stuff, okay? That's Art Nouveau. Hidden in the Art Nouveau at the top are candlesticks. That's Jewish, okay? So what we get is a wonderful interactive pattern between mainstream and subcultural iconographic components. in these covers. You also get, so let's look at this a little quickly. We have H.A. Rusotto. That's not his real name. He thought Rusotto sounded better. It was Italian. It would be more musical. We have here the Hebrew Publishing Company. Why Hebrew? Because that's what the Jews were called in America then, was Hebrews. There's a lyre. The lyre is not Jewish, but it is Jewish. It's King David, but it's also in every piano in the parlor had the pedals around a lyre. It is a joint mainstream subcultural structure. Now, the main thing, though, is the language here. No, let's look at the picture first. So what is the picture? The picture seems to be a woman blessing the candles in a Sabbath dinner. It is done archetypally, okay? We don't know who she is. She has no name. And it's done as a drawing, as a line drawing, okay? The text is in two languages. The Yiddish Lichtmenschen is buried in the filigree. And the main thing you see that draws your eye immediately is the romanization. That means that they're selling it. This is in the shop windows. This is what people are buying. So this is packaging. So they think it's more important to foreground the transliteration than the original. So we know we're already in a point of transition, okay? Even though this is only like 1911, where transliteration is important, okay? All right, let's compare it to the right. So this is a song about piety and doing the right thing and being a good Jewish woman, and it's a very, very in-group didactic. There's like a lot of Jewish folklore is didactic. And the Hasidic communities in Brooklyn, by the way, really have a lot of these songs still, and young adult fiction about girls growing up to be proper Jewish women. So this has not disappeared. On the right, we have a lot of text. This is brilliant for historians, okay? We've got from Cantor Sirota's concert repertoire, then there's some Hebrew, then that's it for the Hebrew. And we go through the transliteration. The liturgical melody sung by Cantor Sirota with overwhelming success on his American concert tour, composed by Leo Loeb, musical director, Tlomatsker Synagogue, Warsaw, arranged for voice with piano organ accompaniment, and copyright 1912. Most of these things were not copyrighted. I did copyright checks for a sample of these. They put down copyright, but they never sent a copy to the Library of Congress, very rarely. Okay, so the difference between the one on the left and right, although they're both connected to religious practice, the one on the right has a line drawing of a synagogue, which looks kind of like the Tlomatsker Synagogue, the great synagogue of Warsaw that was destroyed during World War II. But it's got photographs. And the photographs are two, the cantor and the composer. The positioning of the cantor, oh my God, it doesn't like being asleep. It doesn't like being awake. Come back. The cantor is the synagogue. That's the content of the synagogue, is the cantor. And that's true about Sirota. He was massively important. He was the first star cantor in terms of making records, okay? And he went back and forth to Europe. He's an American concert tour. He's from Warsaw. Poor Sirota, however, happened to be in Warsaw in 1939 and perished. He should have been on a New York tour that year. He would have survived. Okay, I'm going to run through some of these so you get the idea of what iconography studies offers us. And I'm going to go through a bunch of these. Okay, so here on the left, we have what we just saw. There's that same synagogue. So you have canonical images. You have a stereotype bunch of imagery. That is the synagogue. It looks like that synagogue. We have, in this case, Joshua Rosenblatt in the lintel. Like, isn't that wonderful? Like, he in the portico right there. There he's again. He is the heart of the synagogue. And this is very much like what we saw, except it doesn't have all that Art Nouveau stuff. It's much more sober. On the right, we've got absolutely one of my totally favorite covers. Whoops. Why did you do that? Thank you. Okay, this is a song from Goldfaden, who was the founder of the Yiddish Theater, and the song is called The Wandering Jew in English. In Yiddish, it says, Yid bist du, geh weiter, geh, which is, you're a Jew, so move on, which is part of the song text. It's not the same. The Wandering Jew is a literary European reference. whereas this is the actual spot. Now, what is so wonderful here, and it's one of my favorites, and maybe I'll blow it up a little for you, is this drawing. This drawing is phenomenal. So what do we get on this drawing on the left? On the right side, we have a scene of classical ruins. There's like a Roman temple and palm trees. We have the figure looking out at the camera, so to speak, a wandering Jew, who is an antique guy with a shepherd's staff. On the left, we have America. Okay, we have a steamer coming into the harbor. We have the Brooklyn Bridge. So he is poised between those two, but he's not an East European immigrant. He is the prototypical, the Kanat Jew. He's an archetypal Jew. So these ideas of archetypes are really important in the iconography. And so I'll just give you a couple more archetypes. That also represent another side of this, which is what we call co-territorial connections. The Jews lived with a lot of other people, and the music was shared, and we call that co-territorial. Okay, this is co-territorial music. It is not Jewish music, but it's published by Hebrew Publishing. It's used by Jews. On the left, we have the Album Musica Romana, and we even have the right diacritics over the A's to show real Romanian. And this is an archetype. These are archetypal Romanian shepherds. So they're rendered also not in photography, but through drawing. Okay, they're archetypal figures. Why is there an album of Romanian music? Well, that's, we could talk about that. We don't have time. On the right, we have Oi Dubinushka and Oi Uchnium, Euchnium, but it's Oi Uchnium, and Vapalia Beryoza Stayala in the old orthography of Russian. Why is Hebrew Publishing doing a Russian folk song that Tchaikovsky used in one of his symphonies? Why are they doing these things? Because the co-territorial came with them, okay? And so they're in America, but they are still anchored in another life at this point, to the extent of needing co-territorial in their music, okay? This goes on. So these are the shepherd. This is the Jewish shepherd, okay? The Jewish shepherd, as you'll notice, and we already saw him before, but here's a woman. The Jewish shepherd is not rendered ethnographically like the Romanian shepherd. It's rendered archetypally because it's biblical. So there is this thing, we are the biblical people, that never changes. This is not an East European image again. And this goes on into the 1920s there on the right. And this is a stock cover. So they had stock covers. And this one is called Yiddish Volkslieder, Jewish folk songs, or Yiddish folk songs. You get stock covers. So I want to do one more of these because it'll go on and on sort of forever with this. It's so fascinating. I'll do another pairing. Let's do the one on the right first. The one on the right is that classic nexus that I've just been talking about. First of all, we have the photograph of the composers. So composers were celebrities enough to be used as photographs. The real person needed to be there. Why? Were Perlmutter and Vole so important to people that their photograph had to be in the image? But this is another stock cover and has nothing to do with the content, because the content is Ov HaRachmon, which is a very serious liturgical thing. The image has nothing to do with this, okay? This is a stock image. What do we have here? We have what this thing says to you as you go and see it in the window is, this is what you do with me. You buy me. You take me home. You put me on the piano you rented or bought. And the girl, dressed in this beautiful flowing outfit, will play for the delight of these people. Now, these are clearly the old folks. Whether that's her brother or a boyfriend, I'm not sure. But they're all, you see what I mean about upward mobility? They're all extremely well-dressed. Is this the way you sit around a tenement on a Friday night? Probably not. But this is aspirational, okay? But it's also commercial. It's a commodified package. So that gives us some sense of that. Do maybe just one more thing, because we have to talk about the theater a little. On the left, we have stuff that advertises itself as being from the theater. This is from the successful play, Weibel Shimlucha, and which is the Women's Kingdom. When I'll get to that when we get the songs. And wow, I've got to move quicker than I'm moving. It's so hard to do this. Here we have, that's Bessie Tomaszewski coming in the window in her pants with a gun. And here are the archetypal East Europe types, okay? The Hasidic type characters. So this is Europe and America, put next side by side, okay? And then it's a folio of songs. Actually, are we doing damaged goods? I think, yeah, that's right. This is damaged goods. Okay. I'll just throw in one more thing, and then I'm going to move to the music itself. Because this is Irving Berlin, the same time, exactly the same time. Irving Berlin is moving out of this. He is not writing for the milieu anymore. He has left. He has walked all the way up to 14th Street from the Lower East Side and is selling songs and becomes a famous songwriter. Okay? So the option was to leave this world and to make it an American culture big time. And the people we're going to hear on the program didn't do that. Either they couldn't or they didn't want to. They stayed in the community. And, of course, that's wonderful. And that's why we have all this terrific music, because those people stayed and served their community instead of doing what. But notice that the violin and this Yiddish, very Yiddish, this is called a ragtime violin. Does this look like a ragtime player? So we have the continuity of certain images that we have here, okay? The Jew and the violin, okay, going over into the mainstream. Okay, so that's all I can do with iconography. I want to do a little with actual music and listen to a couple things, and let's see what we can do with that. No, this is it. Okay, we're going to listen to a couple of things when we can't do too many. You're going to hear so many. We don't need to listen to so many. Okay, so what I want to do is play you just a little sonic sense of what it was performed like originally, which probably Michael will do as well. But just a contrast between old generation and newer generation sounds, and of course, and some of the ideological and orientations of the people in the community. So first thing I'm playing is just a little hit off of a song from the Yiddish Theater, but an 1897 Yiddish show. Okay, it's still back in the 19th century. Recorded 20 years later in 1917, which means that show and these songs were still somewhere in memory, or Columbia Records would not have put it out. This is I describe this play in great length in my book, Tenement Songs, which you can still buy. And I put that entire 4-act melodrama on at Wesleyan in 1976. It seems impossible. And people were not exactly doing that in schools like Wesleyan. At that time, it was one of the first things, and Michael's carrying on this great tradition of doing modern adaptations of the old music, and so I did that in English very deliberately back then. Okay, so here's the song. It's cantorial, it's slightly operatic, it's really creaky, and the sound quality is, like the sound quality. But I'm just going to give you a little of that, give you a sense of how they would have sung this theater material when it was all very weighty. Still, and it wasn't light and American. Oy vey. This is very Italian opera, right? Da, 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 da. He can't quite hit these notes. Okay? But that's just a small taste of the old sound. So I want to do a few other things. As I go through this stuff with all these different topics, the topics get more modern, the whole music gets more Americanized, and you're going to hear that eventually in our concert. I'm just going to give you two contrasting sounds. They liked, it wasn't all just solo music from the theater. There were choral pieces that people might sing at home. And I'll play you two contrasting pieces. These are both from 1917. It's a fateful year. because America goes into World War I, and the Jews are now asked to go die for America and fight their own relatives in Austria-Hungary, for example, Germany. This is no joke for American immigrants. At the same time, the Russian Revolution happens, which is great liberation and great joy in the American Jewish community. So there are two songs that do this text. Here's the Russian one. Okay. Here's the text on the left. Carry sounds of freedom to Siberia in the cold north. Okay? It's very formal. It's very singing society style. This is not theater music, okay? And it's done in a Russian seriousness of purpose, okay? Minor key. Okay, and we'll contrast this with another one, which is on the topic of America. And this one is called My America, Our New Hymn. And this sounds like a nice American patriotic song, okay? This is serious, so if you ask me to give my life, you need my blood, you'll have it this minute. Okay? I won't even ask why. Whatever you want should happen, because this is America. Notice the great formality of the English. Sacrifice and in a trice, thou wouldst prove. Okay? So this is a serious, and that's no joke that it's called a hymn. And this is surprising, but it's 1917. So these are some of the songs. I want to play you a much funnier one that's much more Americanized and gets us to the theme of the Weibelsche Brüche, that show we just saw. This is the song text. We'll look at the song text, then I'll play it for you because that's easier. Okay? This is, this is Weiber macht mich für Präsident. Women, make me president. Make me a president, and we will control the men. And it says, koch nit kein Dinner, Weiber. Okay? Don't cook dinner. And wasch nicht kein Diapers. Okay? Don't wash any diapers. Don't go to the country. That's like the Catskills, the country. When the summer comes, the men are going to stay home and they frolic. Pink wie Chazerim, like pigs. The train will bring them up to the Catskills every week, and we don't know what they're doing in the city. They may be having affairs, whatever. So this is quite the song, okay? And this is the kind of stuff that I really got a kick out of, because here we are talking about real Americanization and the kind of view of Yiddish immigrant culture that you absolutely don't get anywhere else. When I was doing this work, Irving Howe's World of Our Fathers came out. World of Our Fathers. Big tome, very serious about the Jews and the radical social movements and blah, blah, blah. He had nothing like this in the book. And partly I did this whole project because I thought this was really fun. And these people were more interesting than they were given credit for. And here's this song. Sounds like Gilbert and Sullivan almost. So this is another world. There are a Welt mit Weltelach is what you say in Yiddish. It's a world with little small worlds inside it, microcosms. But probably, am I out of time? Well, I wanted us to sing something. We'll sing something. Okay. Let's see. Where did I put it? Okay. This is the chorus from a song called The New York Tears. And let's sing that. This is a really deep than American songs. The chorus tells you about all the terrible things that happen in New York to Jews who come here and what we're living with. And this is the refrain. Sein in die New Yorker Tränen, was kennen kein Mal nicht aufhören. Okay, let's try. Da seien die New Yorker Tränen, was kennen kein Mal nicht aufhören. A Krächz, a Geschrei, a Sifts und a Weh, das kennt ihr noch immer da Herren. All right, let's try that. A Krächz, a Geschrei, a Sifts und a Weh, das kennt ihr noch immer da Herren. Das ist so nicht da, wo ihr geht nur vorbei, seht ihr die New Yorker Tränen. What is this? This is the New York Tears that will never stop. A Krächz, that's a moan, a sob, a Geschrei, a scream, a shout, a Zifts, a sigh, and a Weh, a man of pain. You can always hear that here. It's not new, and wherever you go, just as you pass by, you're going to see the New York Tears. So let's try that through once, and then I will knock off, right? Da seien die New Yorker Tränen, was kennen kein Mal nicht aufhören. A Krächz, a Geschrei, a Sift und a Weh, das kennt ihr noch immer da Herren. Das ist schon nicht nahe, wo ihr geht nur vorbei. Seht ihr die New Yorker Tränen? Thank you very much. Okay. Yeah, you can actually.
Is there one question?
One question. There must be one question.
Is there one question while we're switching over to Michael?
And notice that's in a wonderful waltz time.
Yeah.
So these, you cannot tell by I didn't go through the analysis of the music itself, which is the other component. A lot of these songs are in these charming kind of waltz times, and they're about the plague of tuberculosis that's killing us, or the miserable sighs and sobs of New York.
It's maybe too much a question for my own sort of background, but when I first started learning these songs, some of which I learned from my grandmother, most of them I learned on gigs. You know, and I learned what I have to know. And back in that day, which is already a long time ago, we bought what were called caning books.
Yes.
The folio.
That's from the 20s. Yeah.
What's the origins of all that? Who's caning?
Well, that's business. That's just a business proposition. This is by the 20s, and those are dance tunes for weddings, and they're like fake books, you know. They're tunes for going out on gigs and playing Yiddish tunes, because there weren't any. So he was the first guy to publish what we would call later fake books, lead sheets, so you could go out and play gigs. That's the world of klezmer, which is another talk altogether. But so that's not songs. We're dealing with this song.
And when did the Hebrew publishing company go out of business?
Not until about 1970 or something.
Wow.
No, it was in the 70s. It was later. It was a couple years after I did that. Mid-70s. They were still just sitting around. They were huge. They published masses of things, textbooks, literature, world literature. Everybody who knew Yiddish had big libraries.
Liturgical books.
And liturgical books. And people came home from the sweatshop and they read Voltaire and Mark Twain and Jack London in editions from Hebrew publishing. And books of etiquette, stuff like that for immigrants.
Great.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
My name is Michael Ochs. I've been asked by the management to give this pre-concert lecture for tonight's premiere performance of our latest production, Die Goldene Kale, The Golden Bride. Now, I know almost all of you in this room are recent Jewish immigrants or children of immigrants, and you all speak Yiddish at home, but I'll speak in English tonight just to give you practice in your new language. This morning at breakfast, you may have found this ad in your daily paper. For the first time, Friday evening, February 9th, that's tonight, there'll be a premiere of a new Yiddish operetta by Joseph Rumshinsky, The Golden Bride. So for the rest of this evening, you won't have to struggle with English. And if you think you're having trouble with English, wait till you meet young Jerome, a character in tonight's production. You'll laugh because he's an American who has trouble speaking Yiddish. For example, he comes out on stage calling out, "Kanala, Kanala." Now, Taube, the innkeeper's wife, is puzzled. Was fra Kanala? What's this Kanala? What does that mean? And another character explains to her, meint war de Kanala. He really means Kanala, which is Taube's own daughter. No, kann nicht herausreden die Ches. He can't pronounce the Ch sound. Now, it's already dark outside, as you can see, on 2nd Avenue Rialto, and the Yiddish stages are brimming with dramas, melodramas, comedies, vaudevilles, variety shows, and operettas. You may remember Rumshinsky's first great hit at this theater 4 years ago, Dem Rebben's Niggen, the Rabbi's Melody, and I shouldn't tell you this, but there'll be a surprise visit in tonight's performance by the lead singer from that operetta, performing some music from the show. From that show. Now, because I was asked to give this pre-concert talk tonight, I watched yesterday's final rehearsal, and I guarantee you this operetta will be so popular, it's going to run for the whole rest of the season, another 18 weeks. And then you can be sure it's going to be exported all over, Boston, Chicago, London, Buenos Aires, maybe even Omaha, Nebraska. Well, after all, I mean, Rumshinsky's Die Chazante, the cantor's wife, played in the Opera House in Lawrence, Kansas a few years ago. Most operettas are forgotten as soon as their first run closes, but I'm sure that Goldene Kale will be so successful you'll be seeing revivals of this decades from now. That's because it gives us a window into our own dreams and values, and also into the trials that we Jews face. For the next 20 minutes or so, I want you to see and hear how this work is carefully tailored to be especially meaningful to tonight's audience, Yiddish-speaking Jews who came with our families to this country during the massive immigration from Eastern Europe that began in the 1880s and has continued for 40 years. If you're younger, you may already have been born here, but you still speak Yiddish at home. You're probably poor, you live in a cramped tenement on New York's Lower East Side, and you work hard to eke out a living. For us, the Yiddish theater is where we gather with family and friends, where we can get distracted from our day-to-day lives and feel completely at home. And as you'll see, the concept of home plays a very big role in this operetta. The composer Joseph Rumshinsky was born in 1881 near Vilna, a major Jewish center in what was then still Russian Lithuania, and is now the Soviet Union. In 1903, he escaped to London to avoid being conscripted into the Tsar's army, and while in London, he continued his music studies with Ebenezer Prout, a respected classical music composer and conductor. Rumshinsky arrived in America the following year and soon became the leading composer of Yiddish operettas. He's already being called the Jewish Victor Herbert. He's producing operettas at a remarkable pace, and at this rate, he's going to write music for 100, I can assure you. Louis Gilrod, who wrote the lyrics, was born in a small town in the Ukraine. His father brought him to America when he was still a kid. In fact, he was around 10, and he left him with an uncle in Newark, New Jersey. Now, Gilrod wrote mostly serious songs, but he also collaborated on a vaudeville skit that dared to compare Tsar Nicholas to Charlie Chaplin. Rumshinsky thinks this libretto is by Louis Freiman, but it wasn't. It was actually written by Louis's wife, Frieda Freiman. And here's the proof. The first page of the libretto manuscript deposited for copyright at the Library of Congress in Washington and registered last June 10th, 1922, reads, Die Goldene Kale, then there's a double underline, then Comedy in 3 acts by Frieda Freiman. The actors we'll see in the show tonight are mostly professionals of the Yiddish stage, typically, though not always, from acting families. A few were born in the U.S., but most either immigrated themselves, like Rumshinsky, or were brought to this country as children, like Gilroth. The setting of Act 1 is a Russian shtetl, a largely Jewish town, perhaps like the Polish town of Wachla, which is pictured here. If you didn't grow up in a shtetl yourself, you're still very familiar with the setting from hearing your parents talk about the old country or from the stories of Yiddish writers like Sholem Aleichem. Acts 2 and 3 take place in a wealthy home here in America, the sort of place most of us dream about but have never seen. Here's the story. Golda is a supposed orphan who comes of age, suddenly inherits a fortune left by her estranged father who had recently died in America. And when she hears this, she cries out, "Long live my dead father who left me such a large inheritance." And the chorus answers, "Long live her dead father." Now she is rich, so she attracts a flock of suitors. But she promises to marry the first one who brings her her birth mother. Nobody said an operetta has to make sense. Now, there's a family of 5 in this show. There's a father, a mother, a son, a daughter, and their ward, Golda. The father is the innkeeper, a stock character in the Yiddish theater. His wife is Taube, who will be portrayed tonight by Annie Tomaszewski. She and her brother Boris Tomaszewski are 2 members of the most celebrated family in the Yiddish theater. You've seen them in many shows, I'm sure. Chana, or Chanele in the diminutive, is Pinchas and Taube's daughter, and Misha is their son, the hero of our story, who is studying at the university, which is quite a thing for a kid from a shtetl. Misha will be played tonight by Michal Michalesco, the handsome 35-year-old matinee idol of the Yiddish theater, shown here with his co-star Lucy Finkel, who plays Golda, or Goldele, the golden bride of the title. Golda was left by her mother at a young age to be raised in the innkeeper's family, which makes her a kind of an orphan. The orphan is, as you know, a favorite character in the Yiddish theater and is supposed to inspire sympathy in all you Jewish mothers out there. You know that Golda will be at the center of a happy ending, and you know from Misha's first song, in which he expresses his love for Golda, who is going to win her in the end. Then there are 2 visitors from America, Golda's uncle and his son. The uncle, Benjamin, is a millionaire. Now, his name in the Yiddish script is spelled out phonetically Benjamin to make it clear that he's adopted the English form of his Hebrew name, which in Yiddish would be Benjamin. Benjamin's son, Jerome, was probably named after some deceased ancestor, maybe Joel or Jacob or Joseph, certainly not Saint Jerome. The young man is so thoroughly Americanized, he barely speaks Yiddish. Of course, the play is in Yiddish, so the actor playing him has to speak Yiddish throughout, but at least he makes lots of mistakes and throws in lots of English words. And then there are 3 suitors of Golda who are deliberately caricatured. Each one makes a ridiculous pitch for Golda's hand. Berke, the cobbler, swears he would be as true to her as a shoe sole. Yankel, the tailor, would give up his sewing needle and scissor to marry her, and Motka, the choir singer, would even give up his tuning fork. The show opens with a chorus of villagers singing excitedly about the millionaire from America and his son who are visiting the shtetl. He has sacks of gold, 100 railroad cars, he's stuffed with money, and he'll make us rich. The singing and dancing start out happily. Rejoice, everybody, rejoice. Good times are coming. Good friends from America from far away will help us. But the mood turns critical, especially of the dollar, which they say can buy anything or anyone. The shtetl characters, like many of us here, dream about money but don't have very much. And the show's creators, play right into this dichotomy by by both admiring and disparaging the dollar. Most Jews right now, of course, have strong socialist or even communist tendencies, and the taint of capitalism, represented by the almighty dollar, is clear in this excerpt. Now, in these recordings, you'll hear that the singers don't always follow the text exactly. Now, let's see if I can get this to work.
Op die grenzen maar moet de kenners daar. Der dollar, oi oi der dollar. Wer kauft zum Weihnachten Klimbassin im Ingmar? Der dollar, oi oi der dollar. Aber dollar, sein wie Gold, sein im dicken Frem. Kiss ihr raus, Mann dem Rachen, nehmt ihm Marem. Wenn die Finger lachen können, ist ich die bei ihm. Dem dollar, oi oi dem dollar. Der dollar, oi 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 der dollar. Kauft auf jeden, es ist der größte Kohler. Sie beweist die größte Kind, wenn die Kind machen und die Minster König bin dem Geld. Auf der Welt ist ein festgestellt. Der Dollar, oi 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 der Dollar. Kauft auf jeden, während sie der größte Kohler. Sie beweist die größte Kind, wenn die Kind machen und die Minster König bin dem Geld. Auf der Welt ist ein festgestellt.
Now, I mentioned an incident that makes fun of Jerome's American pronunciation of Yiddish. In the second number of the show, Jerome, in his broken Yiddish, sings about the freedom in the United States and describes the wonders there. He talks about die elevators und die subways sieht man dort. You see elevators and subways there. Sis prohibition, there's prohibition, und man trinkt auf jeden Ort, and there's drinking everywhere. When Jerome says he's in love with Hannah, the Toiba asks him, how can you love my daughter when you've known her for only 2 weeks? His answer, with us in America, in 2 weeks, you fall in love, you get married, you get divorced, and you get married again. Now, Jerome promises he'll take good care of Hannah, adding in English, so help me God. So he's asked to swear to that in Yiddish. And so he thinks very hard, and he finally comes out with, so soll mir helfen, Jesus. So help me, Jesus. We're hardly 10 minutes into the show, and they've already made fun of money, Americans, English, and even religion. And speaking of religion, for most of us here, the synagogue has been replaced as a social center by the theater. But even as secular Jews, we've all been raised in a Jewish environment, so a nod to religious ritual is part of almost every Yiddish stage plot. Sure enough, as the finale to Act 1, Misha sings Kiddush, prayer to welcome the Sabbath. And to many of us, this ceremony will bring back happy memories of grandma lighting Friday night candles, tasty Friday night meals. Rumshinsky's music for the Kiddush sounds just as the way a cantor in a synagogue might improvise it. You'll hear words and phrases repeated, a typical feature of Jewish cantorial style. The soloist in this recording is, in fact, a well-known cantor. You'll hear the use of the so-called Phrygisch mode, a variation of the Phrygian mode, based on a scale that sounds like this. Da-da-da-da-dum. The interval between the second and third notes of the scale is called an augmented second. Da-da-da-dum, da-dum. It's part of what makes it sound Jewish, or more accurately, East European. The scale is the basis for a lot of Jewish cantorial singing, as well as Yiddish klezmer music, and Yiddish songs that you probably sing at home and hear at weddings, like Hava Nagila. There it is again. It's one of the musical devices chosen by Rumshinsky to connect the show with the audience. This excerpt is going to start in the middle. This would be the synagogue choir repeating what the Chazan was singing. Now, we've just heard a religious ritual, and if there's such a thing as a secular ritual in the Yiddish theater, it's a lullaby, which reminds folks of their childhood and, in addition, gets the mothers in the audience to remember the sweet connections between mother and baby. Golda is thinking about how she wants her birth mother, whom she calls her real mother, her Emerson mama, to attend her wedding, and remembers her mother singing her to sleep. I'll skip over this. Well, I'll tell you about this. This is the lead sheet that Rumshinsky will be conducting from tonight, showing only the vocal lines for the instrumental sections, and for the instrumental sections, only the melody of what the orchestra is playing. Now, Yiddish uses the Hebrew alphabet, and like Hebrew is written from right to left, music, of course, reads left to right. So how do you get around this? Well, the music moves in the normal way, left to right, but the words are broken into syllables, each syllable reading right to left, which makes it a little tricky to read, but you get used to it. In the show tonight, you'll hear Golda tenderly remembering her mother singing 3 different lullabies to her. Of course, using borrowed music is a time-honored practice in musicals. The second lullaby, which begins, "Your father from your childhood in America," fits into the story so well, it could have been written for this show, but it actually dates from 30 years ago. We'll hear the third, Cossack Lullaby, a Russian song with lyrics by the poet Mikhail Lermontov. Finkel has a fine soprano voice that's unfortunately a bit distorted in this pressing. The yearning for Russia, for your shtetl, for your home, for your childhood, is a major subtext of the entire operetta. It reflects the feelings that many of us here have for home, even though for most of us life is clearly better in America. The idea of home is expressed repeatedly in Goldene Kala. As Misha is coming home from the university and nearing home early in the story, he intones a recitative in the quasi-cantorial style, beginning, "Heim siese heim," literally home sweet home, a conscious allusion to the Stephen Foster lyric. And you can buy this record in the theater lobby. For the younger folks here, I'll explain why Russian and the Russian language plays a large role in this Yiddish operetta. Tsar Alexander III ascended to the imperial throne in 1881 and immediately began a vigorous policy of anti-Semitism, resulting in oppressive laws, expulsions, and pogroms in which Jews were murdered by the thousands. We in this hall are among 2 million refugees who have come to America since the 1880s, fleeing the Russian Empire, and then from various Russian wars, the last one of which ended in 1921, just 2 years ago. Even so, many of us still nurture the hope of returning someday to a free Russia, the ideal communist state, and this yearning for home is repeatedly reflected in the operetta. A Greeting from the New Russia is one of 2 numbers from the show for which sheet music has been issued, and it's already been recorded, and you can buy a record from the lobby. The music for the chorus section is a march based on a traditional song, Dubinushka, which we saw a few moments ago, which conveys the strength of the character's convictions. For the end of the refrain, the language switches to the original Russian. I should mention that the famous Shalyapin recorded the song back in 1908. The transliteration is Theaterloschen, theater Yiddish. It's not.
Land, wo es wird neu aufgestellt. Jetzt zieht ihn es doch an ein Leben, a freie, abliehende Welt. In dem Land, wie wir seinen geboren, in glücklicher Zukunft getracht, die schönste, die bliehende Joren, haben mir dort alle verbracht. Oh, ich bring euch a Gries in der neue Russenland, wo streift in es oft auf a Weltverband. Du sollst es vernichten, in ganzen Service, wie ihr Streben in Hofen, der Idin auf der Krieg. Die Strahlen in Licht haben Kämpfer geschafft, nur mit Mut, mit Blut, mit Kraft. Dort singt man, hey, du Binuschka da oben, hey, Jenona, ja, sama, paidiot, die Strengai Hagerit in der neuen Rosenland.
But praise for America is heard over and over again as well. So at tonight's performance, you'll hear Jerome singing, "America is a land where everybody is free, and everyone who lives there is faithful to the country. You can see wonders there and endless miracles. It's the best and the greatest, believe me." And I think you'll be surprised to hear this instrumental example of American music in the middle of a Yiddish operetta. Thank you. Now, so far, we've seen the works creators serve up many devices designed to play into our specific feelings and memories and to connect with us as Jewish immigrants from Europe. But there's more. The sine qua non of every operetta, love. If Misha is going to marry Golda at the end of the operetta, he first has to show that he's in love with her, and he has to overcome obstacles like finding Golda's mother, and finally win her. Every Yiddish operetta audience, actually every operetta audience, wants to hear a beautiful love song. The duet, Mein Goldele, is expected to be such a favorite that it's also been issued as sheet music, and it's also for sale in the lobby. We'll now listen to the first verse and the chorus, sung by Michalesco and Finkel.
In sei Batug in sei Barach. Ich los mein Herz mit dir gezeugt, nur ein Blick in deine süße Augen. Als mein Schirme mein, mein goldene, mein goldene, mein schöner süßer Maleru, mit dir noch sein, ist mein Begehr, mit dir auf immer ist mehr.
This piece represents one more way the operetta is tailored to its Yiddish audience. Every Jewish mother in this theater wants to see her daughter married. And in the old country, that meant when a girl reached maturity, her parents might go to a matchmaker who would seek out the perfect husband for her. In real life, the process can be highly emotional, but in goldene kale, it's an excuse for a couplet number, an opportunity for ad-libbing topical references, usually as humorous insults. Kalman, the matchmaker, goes up to every female on stage and sings to each one that he has a perfect match for her. We'll hear 2 verses on the following recording. Now, this piece represents one more way. I'm sorry, I said that already. Mamaliga, by the way, is a Romanian cornmeal dish. Now, I'm going to read you one more verse, and you'll notice that the nouns are all in English. Ich hab von dir a Waiter, was kann waschen dishes. Do you need a translation? Is euch a salesman by Jonas Schimmel's Knishes. He's a salesman at Jonas Schimmel's Knish Bakery. Now, hocus pocus, we're now back in New Haven in the 21st century, and I can tell you that Jonas Schimmel's Bakery is celebrating its 105th year in business, still at the same address on the Lower East Side. Finally, here's a scene from the last act of Die Goldene Kale, showing all the happy couples at the wedding of Golde and Misha. A schönem Dank, ihr seid gewesen gute Äußere. Thank you, you've been a great audience.
Question, then we're going to take a short break. There's nothing for sale in the lobby, but we do have a small little token for you all as a takeaway. It's a small commemorative CD of examples of Yiddish song from the Historical Sound Recordings Collection in Yale's Music Library. So they'll be out there for you to take with you. There's also a little reception following the recital. So one question for Michael?
First I have one announcement that I was asked to make. The National Yiddish Theater Volksbühne actually did a performance of this with piano, a concert performance last May, and it's going to be repeated in August, on August 5th at Rutgers University. You're all welcome, except this time they're going to do it with some instruments. So anyway, now if anybody has a question. Yes?
You were talking about all the influence. When you gave the example of the matchmaker, I thought taught Gilbert and Sullivan.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. I have no evidence, but I'm sure that Rumshinsky knew some Gilbert and Sullivan.
Thank you.